Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Mrs. H. I'm a credentialed English teacher, and during the COVID-19 school closures, I'm using some of the spare time I've got to create YouTube content for 6th through 10th graders who are experiencing school closures across America. I am tailoring some of this content to my current students in my class because I'm hoping it's going to help them out. And that is why today I am jumping to counter arguments. My students in my 8th grade class who are writing persuasive essays, the majority of the votes from my exit ticket on a Zoom meeting I had this week was to make a video about counter arguments. So here I am making this for you guys. This does require knowledge of how a body paragraph works, because a counter argument is basically a body paragraph, but with a few things functioning somewhat differently. So the mechanics are the same, just kind of the way we think about it is a little bit different. I will be creating a video about body paragraphs, and as soon as that video is created, I will link it in a card to this introduction, and if you're subscribed to my channel, you will get those notifications. So talking about counter arguments, after the slides, if you make it through the slides and you make it through all of the lesson, I will tell you guys about Jar Jar. You have to earn it though, and we are on the honor system. Of course, you could skip to the end and learn about Jar Jar there. I can't control what you do on your own computer, but it will be a much more rewarding experience if you watch the entire video. If the video runs long, I will be putting in some stopping points so that you can take a break and come back later. I certainly would not want you to sit and watch a video on any kind of ELA stuff all by yourself. It's very different from being in the classroom, so don't overwhelm yourself by watching too many instructional videos. All right, guys, let's get to the slides. The counter-argument paragraph. This is an integral part of persuasive essays. It's a very important paragraph to include in your persuasive essay, and it is the type of paragraph that really sets apart persuasive essays from literary response essays, informative, and other types of writing. This is designed for 6th through 10th graders. So for 6th graders, this might be kind of new for you. And for 10th graders, this is going to be a lot of review, but helpful, especially if you are doing some distance learning right now. And this is also good for students who might be prepping for the SAT. Just a heads up though, I've never taught an SAT prompt that required a counter-argument paragraph in the response, but still being familiar with this is very, very helpful. How to get the most out of this video. Watch on a larger screen, just like my previous videos, such as a tablet or a computer. You are going to be looking at some writing in detail, and you'll want to be able to read along and understand the color coding that you see on the screen. And if you watch on a phone, it's probably going to be really hard to see. Take breaks when you need to. This is a long video and I put in some suggested break spots, but take more if you need to. Also, my 8th graders, if you are currently drafting or editing a counter argument, pause after each part and review or revise your own paragraph. So if I just talked about topic sentences, pause the video there and go and look at your own topic sentence and make revisions as you need to. The other thing you're going to need to get the most out of this video is you need to confidently understand body paragraph format. That is stoplight paragraphs. It's the type of paragraphs I use in previous videos because a counter argument is a stoplight paragraph. It follows that same structure just with a few twists. And if you're not familiar with it, you might feel kind of lost. However, if you're pretty familiar with it, especially my 8th graders who have been writing a persuasive essay over the last couple of weeks and you've been doing body paragraphs, this new way of thinking about that structure will make sense to you. But if you're not sure, then watch a previous video. So what is a counter-argument paragraph? Let's break it down to the word counter-argument and even smaller, the word argument. An argument are reasons and analyses presented to convince a listener or a reader. We all know what an argument is. We've all had one, intellectual or not. When we add the word counter to that, it kind of twists the meaning a little bit. So in this context, counter means opposition or opposed. So it means the argument that is opposed to you. A counterargument paragraph is the part of a persuasive essay that brings up an argument from the other side of the debate and refutes it. So when we say counterargument, we are both referring to the argument that is opposite from you and the argument you're going to give to oppose that argument. Where in an essay does a counterargument belong? Typically, it is going to be the third body paragraph. So in this sample essay you've got on the screen, you've got a full introduction, we've got body paragraph 1, we've got body paragraph 2, and your counterargument goes after body paragraph 1 and body paragraph 2. One of the reasons it goes there is because you need to prove your first and second reason from your thesis in body paragraph 1 and body paragraph 2. If you moved your counterargument to the beginning, first of all, you're going to come off kind of combative, and your neutral reader isn't going to appreciate that very much. Plus, your counterargument is the place where you get to say some of the reasons and arguments maybe you didn't have room or space to say in body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2. Also, if you bring up a counterargument after you've given a really thorough explanation for your side, it's a little more safe for your reader to hear an argument from the opposite side without them suddenly switching. Because you've got them pretty well rooted on your side of the argument already. So that risk you might take in a counter-argument is greatly lowered. So that's why it goes in the third body paragraph. So here's my counter-argument paragraph. I am going to go over this in detail, part by part, but I just want to read it to you in general so you get a feel of a counter-argument paragraph. I am going to remind you guys of my thesis statement. My thesis statement is the same as the previous video. I want you guys, if you watched my persuasive body paragraphs video, I want you to imagine that I'm just moving forward in that same essay. So my thesis statement, the United States should adopt a junk food tax because of the issue of obesity and the fact that people need help changing their buying habits. Again, reminder, just like in the first video, this isn't necessarily how I personally feel. I'm just taking a side for the sake of putting an essay on the screen for you guys. I have my reasons, reason 1 and reason 2, in my thesis statement crossed out here. The reason why is I've already talked about them in an earlier paragraph, and I really just want to focus on the first part. The United States should adopt a junk food tax, reminding myself and my reader what side I'm on. So keep that in mind, that this is the side of the argument I'm on as I read my counter-argument. Topic sentence. Opponents of junk food taxes present some concerns which have practical solutions. Evidence. In a U.S. News and World Report article, Mary Kate Carey, a former White House speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush, says, quote, "Controlling what we put into our mouths is not a job for the government," end quote. In-text citation, Carey. Analysis. Carey expresses concern that a junk food tax would be an overreach of government power and that our right to choose for ourselves would be threatened. The way she phrases this sounds like a tax is a form of control, likening a junk food tax to an elimination of a choice. Americans highly value the right to choose, especially when it is as personal as what we put into our bodies. So she makes a powerfully worded argument against the junk food tax. However, she does not make a truly powerful argument. By taxing junk food, the government is not eliminating a choice for consumers at all. The junk food is still available for purchase, and therefore the choice is still there for consumers. The junk food tax is meant to prompt consumers to think more critically about what they are putting into their bodies, thus informing consumers, not attempting to control them, as Carey suggests. In many cities where they are exploring or already implementing junk food taxes, the revenue from the taxes is actually going toward making healthy food cheaper and increasing the choices available to consumers. Concluding sentence. On the surface, The junk food tax may appear to be an overreach of government, but truly it is a tool for the government to do its job of protecting consumers. So now you've got the gist of my counter argument. I'm going to break it down for you guys so that you could kind of see how I constructed it, and you can go and look at your own counter argument and evaluate it to see if there's any changes you need to make, or if you're having trouble writing it in general, hopefully this will help to move you along. So general tips for counter arguments, and these apply no matter what I'm writing. If I'm writing my topic, sentence, evidence, analysis, I need to be fair. Be fair. This is really important. Treat the other side as though their concerns and arguments are valid, because they are. If you're writing about a topic that is persuasive and worth writing an essay about, the other side is valid, has valid concerns. Be clear about your sources and offer full explanations of the other side's arguments. In short, don't be shady. You want your reader to be able to explore the other side if they want to. You need to have confidence in your side of the argument that if your reader were to explore the other side, they would still come back to your side and agree with you. Do not attack the other side or use mudslinging. This is a very important technique, because while we do see this on the national stage with our politicians, when you are working with a smaller audience with your persuasive essay, you want to assume that your reader is neutral, or your readers are neutral. And by attacking and mudslinging, you're going to automatically turn off a neutral reader. So make sure that you are being fair. One way to be fair is try to maintain a neutral and objective tone. This makes you sound really even. It makes you sound very informed. It's really a good technique for you to practice. So assume your reader is neutral. Being overly zealous can be a turn off. This is true throughout your counter argument. Try to not get overly passionate. Now, depending on your English teacher, this is the tip I always give to my students. If you're writing to a neutral thinking audience who could be swayed either way, it's usually going to turn them off. However, you might have an English teacher that really wants you to get into this and be really passionate and exercise that writing, which actually is a good writing technique to practice. But I do think that is not as challenging as being fair and being able to present a strong argument in a neutral and approachable tone. I think that shows a lot more polish, sophistication, and it will sway more readers. That's my opinion. So, counterargument, topic sentence, there's a lot of things about it that line up with regular topic sentences. It is still the first sentence in a body paragraph. That is its location, and in a counter-argument paragraph, it still has the same location. It states what will be discussed or proven in that paragraph. And in a counter-argument paragraph, it acknowledges that there is another side to the debate. You don't want to leave your reader in the dark and let them think that there's only one side to this debate. You're trying to persuade them because there are two valid sides. In your topic sentence, this is an optional thing to do. It might also assure the reader that the other side's concerns or arguments are not worrisome, and doing this without undermining the other side. So you can assure your reader that the other side has nothing to worry about and do it without undermining them. So here's an example of a topic sentence for a counter. In any debate, it is important to examine the opposing side. That lets your reader know that you are going to look at the other side and present it to them. Here's another example. Though a junk food tax is clearly what our country needs, there are still those who present concerns. In this, I'm addressing that my side, I still believe my side is right, and I'm presenting that in a way that I think everyone will agree with me, but I am also pointing out that the other concerns are worth examining. So here's my topic sentence. I always keep my thesis statement nearby when I'm writing a topic sentence because I don't want to forget it, especially in a counter argument. For students who are writing a counter argument for the first or second time and they're young writers, 6th through 8th grade, a lot of them kind of get tripped up in counter arguments because they're still thinking about it in as though it's a body paragraph. And you want to make sure you remember what side you're on in a counter-argument. Okay, so my thesis statement, the United States should adopt a junk food tax. And here is my topic sentence. Opponents of junk food taxes present some concerns which have practical solutions. Here, it's my first sentence, location checks out, and I am presenting the other side and saying that they've got some concerns without validating it too much. Counter evidence. So you want to remember what I said about evidence in my previous video. Evidence in a persuasive essay is very important to your credibility as a writer, as well as the credibility of your argument, and this is true in a counter-argument because if you're bringing up a quote from a source and that source happens to be really credible and quite impressive because of all of their credentials, you don't want to hide that from your reader. You don't want to undermine them. In fact, the more credible your source sounds or your counter evidence sounds, and you're able to argue against it, the stronger your counter argument is going to be. You still need to assume that your reader has not done your research and does not know anything about the quotes you're presenting. They don't know these articles, they don't know any of it, so you need to make sure that you're very specific and you're very clear and transparent about where you got your quote. This is true in the counter argument, and in fact, presenting evidence in your counter argument is very similar, almost exactly the same as you would present evidence in a regular body paragraph. So for counter evidence, you're going to find a quote from your research which opposes you. That's the part that trips students up. You are so well trained to find a quote that supports you, and that's what you always practice. Now you need to go and find a quote that opposes you. My students who love to debate, they love writing counter evidence because these are the quotes that as we were doing our research, when they came up, you immediately wanted to argue with them. Try to remember that quote and go back and find that quote. For context, you'll state the speaker and the speaker's credentials just the same. Include background about how the information was obtained if you need to. Is it a journalist citing a doctor? Is it a voter who is learning about the junk food tax and they're commenting on it? What way did this information or did this quote get produced? And if needed, state the published source of the quote. That helps. It does, if it's a well-known source, it's good for the reader to know that it came from somewhere that they could easily access. Copy the quote exactly as it appears. Do not misquote your speakers. Use only the most important part of the quote. Don't use too long of a quote, otherwise you're going to have to write a really long analysis. So the shorter your quote is, the less analysis you are expected to write. Don't forget to include a citation. This is also important in counter evidence. As I said earlier, presenting your counter evidence is almost identical to presenting regular evidence. The only twist is it's a quote that disagrees with you. And I can't emphasize this enough, be fair. Try to present evidence with a neutral tone. Don't withhold any information from your reader just because you're worried it might make the quote sound too good, and don't oversell either. Don't include anything that isn't really needed in the evidence. Be fair. Just to demonstrate what it would be like if you presented a quote without its context, it's very awkward. So here's a quote on the screen. The voters there have made it clear that they can decide for themselves what they can eat and drink. Cool. This could have been said by anyone though, right? If I just throw this into my counter-argument paragraph and I don't tell my reader who said it, where I got it from, it raises a lot of concerns. Did I just make it up? You need to tell your reader where it came from. So let's see how the quote sounds now that I've added my context. Roger Salazar, a spokesman for No on D, an anti-soda tax campaign, stated to the San Jose Mercury News, quote, "The voters there have made it clear that they can decide for themselves what they can eat and drink." Now the quote makes a lot more sense knowing that it came from a No on D spokesman. and not just any random person. Don't forget your in-text citation. In-text citation for this is Lochner. I know that Lochner doesn't appear in the context anywhere. That's how to create in-text citations and all of that is really its own video, guys. So hopefully I'll have time to make that. Counter evidence. So I've already got my topic sentence labeled here. My evidence is easy to see on the screen because all you got to do is look for the start and end quotes, and that surrounds my quote. Controlling what we put into our mouths is not a job for the government. My context, I got it from a U.S. News and World Report article. The person saying it is a woman named Mary Kate Carey, and she's a former White House speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush. Pretty impressive credentials to be a speechwriter. And then there is my in-text citation, Carey. That's my presentation of evidence. So I've got my checklist up here: context, quote, citation. All right, guys, this is a good spot to take a break. For this video, during my break reels, I'm going to be showing pictures from a lovely vacation I took to Venice about 4 years ago with Mr. Hulawat. Fun fact, Mr. Hulawat proposed on that Venice vacation, and so we really, really miss traveling right now, and for this video I kind of wanted to work in some of my travel memories during a break. So yeah, go take a break, and I will see you guys for analysis. All right, guys, break is over, and we are going to start right up with counter analysis. I've put an icon of bowling pins and a bowling ball here, and you'll understand why in just a moment. So counter analysis, this is a place where students get tripped up in counter arguments as well. You still want to go to level 2 and level 3, but level 3 functions a little bit differently. So when you go to analyze the quote, for level 2, you want to first explain the argument to the reader and be sure to do so in a fair manner. Make sure that your reader, that you are clear about what the argument is saying, and in this way you are setting up your bowling pins. For level 2, you sort of want to treat the quote as though you are writing a regular body paragraph. For level 2, you want to imagine that you are maybe you've switched sides for a brief moment just to explain the other side to the reader. Being able to clearly explain the other side shows that, one, you understand the other side of the argument. You've researched it, you understand it, and you see where it is valid. 2, you start to set up points in level 2 that you're going to knock down in level 3. The other thing is, you cannot assume that your reader understands what the quote means. By simply presenting a quote, and even though it might make sense to you, it doesn't mean that your reader is going to understand it, especially if they haven't done the research that you have. So you still have an obligation to explain what the quote means, even if the quote is against you. The step you take in level 2 can set you up for a really good level 3. Level 3, this is the place where you're going to refute the opposition. This is where you are going to send that bowling ball down the alley and knock out those pins that you set up in level 2. You could do one or a combination of the following in order to counter the argument that you brought up. This is where you are knocking down your bowling pins. So one way to do it is to prove how the opposing argument is erroneous or faulty. Is logically, does it not actually make sense? Prove that the opposing argument is unjust or unfair. Maybe it sounds like an interesting solution, but it would be very unfair to a certain group of people or unfair in practice. Prove that the opposing argument is impractical, meaning that if it were applied to real life, it wouldn't actually work properly. It wouldn't work the way that people are imagining it will work. Okay? The analysis is the place to bring up arguments which the articles do not make and which you thought of on your own or which the articles they bring up but you don't have room to cite. This is almost like your cleanup batter, those of you guys who are baseball fans. Anything that you didn't get to mention earlier because you were really focused on your thesis reasons, a counter analysis is a good place to bring that up. Do not present a new quote in your analysis to combat the counter evidence. Use your own words. The reason why is because your words are more powerful, and there is a quote, there's probably a quote to back up any possible reason for any possible side of an argument. If you did your research properly, you would be able to find a quote for almost every reason you could think of. The thing is, a counter-analysis, it's not asking for a counter-quote. It's not asking for you to quote something else in order to fight back against the quote from the opposite side. You need to use your own words and explanation to argue against the quote you brought up. Okay? So here's my counter-analysis, remembering that I am arguing in favor of junk food taxes. Because the beginning of my analysis sounds like I may have switched sides, but here it is on the screen. There's my topic sentence, this is my evidence, and all of this is my analysis. I'm going to break it down for you guys. I'm going to show you the different levels, and I'm going to also show you my brainstorm, which is here, about how I got to my analysis. But just wanted to point out to you guys, your analysis still comes after the quote. So this is my quote on its own, and this is how I brainstormed around it. I still like to ask those levels of questioning. I will usually just ask a series of questions, and then I will put what level I think they are after. It kind of helps my brain flow better, but you're going to see the questions pop up with the level already labeled. So my quote, in a U.S. News and World Report article, Mary Kate Carey, a former White House speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush, says, controlling what we put into our mouths is not a job for the government. Carey. So my first question is this a credible source? And yeah, it is. It's very widely available, easy to access, and a lot of people will use U.S. News and World Report. Another question I asked is, does her political tie impact her opposition to taxes in general? So I know that President George H.W. Bush is a Republican. Another thing I also know is Republicans tend to be not in favor of taxes. They tend to be against taxes, not all taxes, but when we're talking about taxes, a lot of times it gets political, and knowing somebody's political party or political affiliation, seeing that Mary Kate Carey was affiliated with a Republican president, could inform me about maybe her fundamental or philosophical approach to taxes. Now, if you remember my analysis, I leave that out because I don't think that it's a strong enough argument to fall to the political party of this speaker to convince my reader, because what if my reader is a Republican who might be open to this particular tax? So, and if I attack her for being a Republican, I'm automatically turning off my readers, which is why I left that out of my analysis, but it is still a worthy question to ask in my brainstorm. Okay? What can Carey gain or lose from junk food taxes? Her personally, if there's anything, if there's nothing, I wouldn't include it in analysis, but it's a good question to ask. In what way is a junk food tax a form of government controlling what we eat? This question is very important for me to answer in my level 2 analysis, because this is explaining the quote. Because she's saying that the junk food tax is a form of controlling. How does it control? This way, if I try to see things from her perspective, I can knock out those bowling pins. This would be one of my bowling pins. Level 3, what other ways does the government control us? Just thinking in general, I don't think I hit that point in my analysis. Level 3, how can I prove that this statement is not true? That's a very important one. That is my bowling ball. This is your bowling pin. This is the bowling ball here. Level 3, what is the job of the government? Here, I could do kind of a play on words later. Maybe she says this is not a job for the government. Maybe I could think about what is the government's job, and maybe there's something I could do around junk food taxes with that and kind of use the play on words against her. Another important level 3, and this is always good to ask in any persuasive writing, what do Americans value and how can I appeal to that in my counter? Good general question, no matter what topic you are writing about. Eighth graders, we're writing about should social media be looked at by colleges and employers. Americans highly value transparency, but Americans also highly value privacy. So what is it that Americans value that you could try to play to and emphasize in your persuasive essay, whether it's in a body paragraph or a counter argument? So here I've got my analysis highlighted for you, and we're going to go in and I'm going to break down level 2 and level 3 for you guys. Hang tight. 8th graders, 7th graders, whenever you are writing your counter analysis, this is a good time to see what I do, and then maybe pause at the end of the slide to go and check out and see if you could do the same in your counter argument. I'm going to show you my bowling pins and I'll show you my bowling balls. All right? So, controlling what we put into our mouths is not a job for the government. Evidence. Sentence 1, Carrie expresses concern that a junk food tax would be an overreach of government power and that our right to choose for ourselves would be threatened. This is an explanation of the quote from the speaker's point of view. That is level 2. I'm explaining the quote to the reader. The way she phrases this sounds like a tax is a form of control, likening a junk food tax to an elimination of choice. So that is also explaining the quote, maybe extending it a little bit, because I asked, well, how is a junk food tax, at least from her perspective, eliminating a choice? This is the way that it's being done. Americans highly value the right to choose, especially when it is as personal as what we put into our bodies. I could start that statement with, in general. I'm addressing my level 3 question, Americans highly value, like what do Americans value? They value the right to choose, especially when it's as personal as what we put into our bodies. And then here, so she makes a powerfully worded argument against the junk food tax. However, she does not make a truly powerful argument. This is bringing it back to the quote, and so this is kind of level 2, but I'm starting to touch on level 3. I'm starting to argue back with her. Notice up here, I don't argue with her. Here, I'm starting to argue with her. I don't want to come out of the gates, swinging my bat and trying to attack her. It's going to make me look bad in front of my neutral reader, and it's going to eliminate my opportunity to have my reader fully understand the quote. Now, it's important to transition to level 3. I get a lot of students who will start writing a counter analysis and end up actually just writing a third body paragraph that's the opposite of what they think, because they forget to argue back with the quote. So level 3, don't forget to argue back with the quote. Usually finding a quote that goes against you and putting it in the paragraph, that's not a difficult thing to do. A lot of students will understand that, but they will forget to argue back. So this is where I'm going to start arguing back. By taxing junk food, the government is not eliminating a choice for consumers at all. I'm arguing back with the quote, level 3. Now I've made that statement, I need to prove it. The junk food is still available for purchase, and therefore the choice is still there for consumers. That's very logical, and that is true. It does argue back with the quote. The junk food tax is meant to prompt consumers to think more critically about what they are putting into their bodies, thus informing consumers, not attempting to control them, as Carrie suggests. Here I use her wording, not against her, but I point out how the wording is actually an illogical way to describe the junk food tax. She's not giving an accurate description, and therefore what she says is not true. In many cities where they are exploring or already implementing junk food taxes, the revenue from the taxes is actually going toward making healthy food cheaper and increasing the choices available to consumers. So in her quote, she's worried about choices being eliminated, and I'm presenting the alternate or the argument against her that in a way, junk food taxes are actually increasing the choices that we've got. So all of my bowling pins, and then these are my bowling balls. Strike. So here I've addressed level 2 and level 3. This is a good spot to take a break, guys. I've got one more lap at the end of this, so make sure that you take a break and you come back for the next lap, okay? The next lap has some really good stuff in it that you don't want to miss, and some really great techniques and tips to finalize our discussion on counterarguments. Okay, break is over. We are on to our final lap, and hang tight because there's a lot of good stuff about counter arguments in this final lap, so stick with me. Concluding sentence, I'm going to move through this one pretty fast because concluding sentence is the same as in any body paragraph. You don't have to do anything special in this concluding sentence. It is the last sentence of a body paragraph. It's also the last sentence of a counter argument. It should clearly end the paragraph for the reader. Mirroring the topic sentence is a simple way to conclude, and as always, avoid saying in conclusion, all in all, or in a nutshell. These are like so cliche to use in a concluding sentence. So the tip I always give is if you need to write that at the beginning of your concluding sentence in order to get your sentence to flow, great. Just make sure that you erase it or edit it out before you turn in your final draft. All right, concluding sentence. You see my topic sentence, you see my evidence, here's my analysis, and my concluding sentence is at the end. On the surface, the junk food tax may appear to be an overreach of government, but truly it is a tool for the government to do its job of protecting consumers. Concluding sentence. So here's an important note. How many counter quotes do I use in a counter argument paragraph? 7th graders, when it is your turn to write this essay, you are going to do one counter quote only, just like the example we saw. So for 7th graders, your counter argument will look very much like this. 7th graders, one quote is enough, especially if we're doing distance learning. Do not do more than I ask. 8th graders, you guys are doing 2 counter quotes, and I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like on a slide that's coming up next. And in general, if you're not sure, if you are one of my former students watching this and you're not sure how many counter quotes to use, I recommend 2. 2 is not too long, it's not too short, it's just right, but you should probably check with your teacher. If they leave it open for you to choose, 2 is a good number. To the eye, it's just the right amount of paragraph to read. So this is a 2-chunk body paragraph. I want to remember my thesis statement. The United States should adopt a junk food tax. Here's the thing though. I don't want to hear anything about obesity, and I don't want to hear about anything about changing buying habits, because I've already written a body paragraph for each of those, so hopefully I don't repeat them here. The first half of it is going to sound very familiar. I just revised the paragraph I've been working with throughout this slideshow to make it 2 quotes, okay? So topic sentence. Opponents of junk food taxes present some concerns which have practical solutions. Evidence 1. In a U.S. News and World Report article, Mary Kate Carey, a former White House speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush, says, "Controlling what we put into our mouths is not a job for the government." Carey. Analysis. Carey expresses concern that a junk food tax would be an overreach of government power and that our right to choose for ourselves would be threatened. The way she phrases this sounds like a tax is a form of control, likening a junk food tax to an elimination of a choice. Americans highly value the right to choose, especially when it is as personal as what we put into our bodies. So she makes a powerfully worded argument against the junk food tax. However, she does not make a truly powerful argument. By taxing junk food, the government is not eliminating a choice for consumers at all. The junk food is still available for purchase, even with the tax attached, and therefore the choice is still there for consumers. The junk food tax is meant to prompt consumers to think more critically about what they are putting into their bodies, thus allowing the government to do its job of informing and protecting consumers, not attempting to control them, as Carrie suggests. Now I'm about to give my second evidence. Notice I don't start a new paragraph. When I say to quote counter argument paragraph, the quotes are in the same paragraph, so I go directly to the next quote. If you're in older grades, sometimes your teachers want like a transition sentence. I really just work the transition into the context. So another concern from opponents, that would be a transition. Another concern from opponents is voiced by the Forum for Health Economics and Policy, where research was published that claims, quote, almost the entire burden of the fat tax falls on poor families. Colitis. Analysis. This raises alarm about junk food taxes because it is known that junk food tends to be cheaper and lasts longer in the pantry than healthy food. So it is often a more economic choice for poor families. This points to a gap between the rich and the poor in that there is not only a gap in finances, there is also a gap in health. So here I've analyzed the quote, not almost as though I was on the side of the quote, but just enough so my reader understands it. But a junk food tax might actually help solve this disparity. So here I'm starting to argue back with the quote. Don't forget to argue back with the quote. In many cities where they are exploring or already implementing junk food taxes, the revenue from the taxes is actually going toward making healthy food cheaper and increasing the choices available to consumers, thus making healthier foods more affordable for struggling families. That argument originally was up here. I moved it down here for a two-chunk paragraph because I wanted to save it for later. It's okay to save arguments for later. They might belong better in another spot. This is true for anywhere in your essay. Concluding sentence, a junk food tax will have a positive impact on our community. I went kind of simple for those because I wanted it to fit on the screen. You can always be more creative or wordy if you want to. Counterarguments, another very important point about counterarguments. This is something students have a harder time with, and if you're really struggling with this, 8th graders during distance learning, don't worry about it. This is just a tip for people who are feeling pretty good about their essays and want to elevate. But if you're already in over your head, don't worry about this. This is really more for to worry about later. Or if I were helping you in class, this is a standard I would hold you to. Do not repeat the reasons you already used in your thesis. Do not use your thesis statements as a counter-argument. We've already gotten full body paragraphs on those reasons. We don't want to hear them again. Your reader doesn't want to hear them again. They're bored with them. It's done. So bring up new stuff. So your example, or my reason one example was we need to reduce obesity. And I discussed that in body paragraph 1. If for my counter argument, I brought up the same quote, controlling what we put into our mouths is not a job for the government. Yeah, the need to reduce obesity it could be used as a counter argument, but the thing is, if I use that, obesity is a problem, and so the government needs to intervene, I already said that in body paragraph 1, and so it's going to be repetitive. The solution is to choose an opposing reason that allows you to bring up a new, unused reason. How do I do that? Well, before writing a persuasive essay, I always have my students make a list of supporting reasons and opposing reasons, no matter what side of the argument they're going to be arguing. It's good to know what the other side might say, and it's good to have a bunch of stuff on your side to say. So this is the list used for my 8th grade, should colleges and employers look at social media. You don't need to read this in detail. What I want to point out to you is how I cross stuff off the list. So if I'm writing on the opposing end, and this is my list of really compelling reasons, in my essay, I really do want to include as many of these as possible. However, if I try to include everything all at once, it's going to be really confusing for my reader. So let's say that for reason 1, I used employers and admissions officers could be looking at the incorrect account and make hiring and acceptance judgments based on false information. Okay? That's reason 1 for my thesis. That would be body paragraph 1. And reason 2 is right to privacy and personal life. Cool. So now I've got 2 reasons, but there's still a lot that hasn't been said yet in my essay. One of the functions of the counterargument is it is a place to say some of the stuff you didn't get to say in your first 2 body paragraphs. You are supposed to only do 2 reasons, 1 per body paragraph, so that your reader doesn't get overwhelmed with all of the reasons all at once. Can you imagine having to write a body paragraph for each one of these? It would be tiring for you and for your reader. That's why you bring to the reader's attention the 2 most important reasons, and then in your counterargument you have an opportunity to choose 2 more reasons. So for my counterargument, I'm not thinking about quotes or anything yet. In fact, I would do this before even writing. I just saved this for the end of my slides because you kind of need to understand what to do in a counterargument before you can do this. So I want to talk about the application process. It's supposed to be a fair playing field. So this is the counter I want to use. I'm already picking my counter and the argument I want to make before I go off and pick a quote. So then I'd look at supporting reasons. What supporting reason could I use this to fight against? And this one. Anything knowingly posted to the internet is open to public scrutiny. I can argue back that the application process is supposed to be a fair playing field, and even if stuff is open for anyone to see, it doesn't mean that employers and colleges should be looking. So I would use this to counter that, and then I would find a quote for opposing number 1, and then I would use this in my analysis. And I would do the same thing if I'm an 8th grader and I am writing a 2-chunk counter argument and I need to find a second one. 7th graders, you only need to do 1. 8th graders, you need to do 2. The other one I want to talk about is information online can be falsified, and something that could be used to argue against would be learning more about applicants that can't be found from the application. If information can be falsified, are you really learning more? So I would use this to oppose that. So I'd find a quote for this and a quote for this, and I would use these points in my analysis to argue back. And in that way, you guys could see that most of my list is highlighted. In the essay I would write based on my choices here, my reader would get to hear a lot of these 4 arguments in depth. So that's how a counterargument helps you diversify what you couldn't talk about in earlier paragraphs. So takeaways. Counterargument paragraphs use stoplight paragraph structure. In level 3 analysis, argue against the quote you brought up. Don't forget to do that. If you forget to do that, then you're basically just writing a body paragraph for the other side, and you don't want to do that. Also, don't reuse the reasons from your thesis in counter-analysis. Say something new. So, did you watch the whole thing or did you just skip ahead? Hopefully you watched the whole thing. We are on the honor system, guys. So as part of my conclusion today, I am going to tell you about this Jar Jar painting. And I will put up a close-up picture of it so you could get a better look. I painted this, and paint actually isn't the right verb. I created this using oil pastels. And this was the first Christmas gift that I ever gave to Mr. Hulawatt back when I was Miss Peralta and we were just dating. I, didn't know the guy too well. We hadn't been going out for too long, but I created this for him because on our first date, we had a very interesting discussion about Jar Jar Binks. I had to make sure that the guy was a Star Wars fan before I continued to date him. Got to make sure that he's into some of the same stuff. And we had a really cool discussion because a lot of people hate Jar Jar, and I could see the argument there. I love every single Star Wars character, and Jar Jar in particular. And back when we had our first date, I had recently read a really cool theory about George Lucas originally planning to have Jar Jar be the Sith version of Yoda. If I can find that theory for you guys, I will link it in the description. And I just thought it was so cool. It added a layer to Jar Jar Binks that I never really thought about before, and it made me like the character even more. In fact, I'm even more fascinated by him. So for Christmas, which was a few months after our first date, as a joke so that this guy would remember me forever, even if I wasn't gonna be around forever, turns out I'm sticking around forever, I created this, and it gave him a good laugh, and now it is also mine since it is very publicly displayed in our home. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please comment below with any other persuasive stuff that you might have questions about, and I'll see if I can address it in a video. And if you are a current student, I will do my best to address it offline. All right, guys? See you on the next one. Don't forget to click like and subscribe.